If she goes, I go. Those 6 words would send the WNBA into absolute chaos if Caitlin Clark actually said them. But here's where the story gets complicated. A wave of online posts has sparked a massive debate surrounding Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham, and claims that a suspension could push the Fever star toward an extraordinary decision. Fans immediately began asking, would Caitlin really walk away if Sophie were suspended? Across #Caitlin Clark and #Sophie Cunningham, social media exploded with speculation. Some supporters insisted Clark and Sophie have developed a powerful connection on and off the court. Others warned that there is a huge difference between fan speculation and an actual statement from Clark. And then came the most dramatic claim of all, that the WNBA could potentially lose a massive portion of its audience if Clark ever decided to leave. That number quickly became part of the online conversation. But is there any evidence that the league would actually lose 50% of its fans? That's a completely different question. Because Caitlin Clark has undoubtedly become one of the most recognizable players in women's basketball, but predicting an exact percentage of fans who would leave is impossible without reliable audience data. Meanwhile, the bigger question remains: what happens when a league's biggest stars become closely associated with their teammates? Can one suspension create a much larger controversy? Can fan loyalty become powerful enough to influence league decisions? And could a situation involving Sophie Cunningham eventually become another major test for the WNBA? Today, we are breaking down the claims, the fan reaction, the speculation surrounding Caitlin and Sophie, and why this controversy has attracted so much attention. Because sometimes, the headline isn't the whole story. The reaction is the story. And right now, WNBA fans have plenty to say. The controversy didn't begin with Caitlin Clark announcing that she was leaving. It began with Sophie Cunningham. As discussions surrounding Cunningham's status spread online, fans immediately connected the situation to the Indiana Fever's biggest star. And that's when everything became much bigger. Across #WNBA, supporters started asking whether the league's decisions involving individual players could eventually affect the chemistry of entire teams. Sophie Cunningham has become an important part of the Fever's identity. Her aggressive style, her physicality, her willingness to compete for loose balls, and her emotional energy on the court have made her a popular figure among Indiana supporters. For many fans, Sophie isn't simply another player on the roster. She's part of the team's personality. That's why any discussion involving her quickly attracts attention. And when Caitlin Clark's name entered the conversation, the reaction became even louder. Across #Caitlin Clark, fans began sharing posts suggesting that Clark would stand behind her teammate. Some posts went even further, claiming Clark had threatened to leave if Sophie was suspended. But there was an important problem. The dramatic quote circulating online was not established as a verified statement from Clark. That distinction didn't stop the internet. Within hours, the alleged quote was appearing in thumbnails. It was being repeated in videos. And thousands of fans were discussing what Clark supposedly meant. This is where the story became bigger than basketball. Fans weren't just debating a possible suspension anymore. They were debating loyalty, team chemistry, player power, and the growing influence of superstar athletes. Basketball analysts have repeatedly pointed out that modern professional sports are different from previous generations. Superstars have enormous platforms. Their words can influence millions of people. Their decisions can affect ticket sales, television audiences, sponsorships, and fan engagement. And Caitlin Clark is one of the clearest examples of that phenomenon in women's basketball. Whenever her name appears in a major headline, the entire sports world pays attention. Meanwhile, Fever supporters continued defending Sophie Cunningham. Many argued that her competitive personality is exactly what makes her valuable to the team. Others believed the situation should be judged strictly according to league rules rather than emotional reactions from fans. That disagreement created two very different conversations. One side was talking about basketball. The other was talking about loyalty. And somewhere in the middle, Caitlin Clark's name became the center of the entire debate. By the end of the day, one question dominated social media. If Sophie really faced a major suspension, how far would Caitlin Clark actually go to support her teammate? The answer remained unclear. But the speculation had already become enormous. By the next morning, the conversation had become even bigger. The phrase "if she goes, I go" was appearing across social media, thumbnails, fan pages, and reaction videos. But there was one major problem. There was no verified evidence that Caitlin Clark had actually made that statement. That didn't stop the internet from treating it like breaking news. Across #CaitlinClark, fans began debating what the quote would mean if it were ever confirmed. Some supporters argued that Clark and Sophie Cunningham have developed a strong team relationship, and that teammates naturally support each other during difficult moments. Others pushed back. They warned that creating an entire storyline around an unverified quote could unfairly put words into Clark's mouth. And then another claim began circulating. The WNBA could lose 50% of its fans if Sophie were suspended. That number immediately attracted attention. But where did it come from? That's the question many people never asked. There was no reliable evidence establishing that exactly half of WNBA fans would stop watching because of one player. Fan behavior is far more complicated than that. Some viewers follow specific players. Others support particular teams. Some watch because of rivalries. Others simply love women's basketball. And many fans follow multiple stars across the league. So while Caitlin Clark unquestionably commands enormous attention, predicting that exactly 50% of the league's audience would disappear is impossible without credible audience research. Still, the claims spread. Why? Because dramatic numbers generate dramatic reactions. A headline saying 50% of fans could leave creates far more curiosity than a headline saying fans debate possible consequences. Across #WNBA, reaction channels began discussing what such a hypothetical situation could mean. Would television ratings change? Would attendance be affected? Would sponsors become concerned? Could a player dispute become a league-wide controversy? Those questions were hypothetical, but they generated very real engagement. Meanwhile, Fever supporters continued discussing Sophie Cunningham's role. Many praised her physical style and emotional intensity. Others argued that the league has rules that must apply consistently regardless of popularity. That created another important debate. Should superstar popularity influence how fans judge disciplinary decisions? Or should every player simply be evaluated under the same standards? Basketball analysts generally favor the second approach. Rules are designed to create consistency. At the same time, fans are emotional. They develop connections with players. They identify with their favorite teams. And when someone they support faces controversy, they naturally react strongly. That's part of professional sports. Across #IndianaFever, the discussion became less about one rumored quote and more about the relationship between players, fans, and the league itself. Caitlin Clark represents enormous attention. Sophie Cunningham represents toughness and personality. And the Fever represent one of the WNBA's most closely watched franchises. Put those three elements together, and even an unverified online claim can become a massive conversation. But the biggest question remained unanswered. Would Caitlin Clark actually take such a dramatic stand for her teammate? Unless Clark herself confirms it. Nobody can honestly say. And that's exactly why the next official statement, or lack of one, could matter so much. As the debate continued, a bigger question started emerging. How much power do superstar players actually have in modern sports? The answer isn't simple. A player doesn't control an entire league. But a superstar can influence attention. Caitlin Clark is a perfect example. Her games attract enormous interest. Her highlights spread across social media. Her jersey has become instantly recognizable. And millions of casual sports fans now know the Indiana Fever because of her. That doesn't mean Clark controls the WNBA. But it does mean her presence has become commercially important. Across #WNBA, fans began debating what could happen if a major disciplinary decision ever involved one of the Fever's most popular players. Would fans protest? Would social media explode? Would television coverage increase because of the controversy? Or would the attention disappear after a few days? Nobody can know for certain. That's because sports audiences are unpredictable. Some fans follow players. Some follow teams. Some follow the league itself. And others simply tune in for the biggest games. That's why claims that the WNBA would automatically lose half its audience should be treated as speculation, not established fact. Meanwhile, the discussion surrounding Sophie Cunningham continued. Her supporters emphasized her energy and competitive personality. They argued that those qualities make her an important piece of the Fever's identity. Critics, however, pointed out that popularity cannot place any athlete above league rules. That created an interesting tension. Player loyalty versus league authority. It's a debate that has existed in professional sports for decades. Fans want their favorite athletes protected. Leagues want consistent rules. Teams want competitive stability. Players want fairness. And officials are expected to balance all of those pressures. Across #Caitlin Clark, supporters continued discussing the alleged quote. Some treated it as symbolic of Clark's loyalty to her teammate. Others repeatedly reminded everyone that there was no verified confirmation that she actually said it. That distinction matters. Because once an unverified statement gets repeated enough times, people can start remembering it as something that actually happened. That's how internet narratives become reality in the minds of audiences. Meanwhile, the Indiana Fever's season continued. Practices continued. Games continued. Players continued preparing for their next opponents. Inside the locker room, the most important conversations were about basketball. Defensive assignments. Offensive sets. Rebounding. Late-game execution. Those details don't generate the same clicks as a dramatic headline. But they are what actually determine wins and losses. Across #basketball, analysts continued emphasizing that the best teams don't allow outside noise to control their season. They learn. They adapt. They move forward. And that's exactly what the Fever would need to do regardless of whatever controversy appears online. Because one thing is certain. The WNBA has become too big to be defined by one rumor. Too competitive to be controlled by one headline. And too unpredictable for anyone to know exactly how fans will react to the next major development. As the online debate continued, one question became impossible to ignore. What would the WNBA actually do if a major disciplinary dispute involving Sophie Cunningham became official? That's where speculation ends and league procedure begins. A professional league cannot make decisions based on social media pressure. It has rules, disciplinary processes, and established standards that apply across the competition. That means fan reactions, even millions of them, wouldn't automatically determine the outcome. Across #WNBA, however, supporters would undoubtedly have strong opinions. Some would demand a lighter punishment. Others would argue that the rules must be enforced consistently. And some would simply want more information before taking a side. That last point may be the most important. Transparency matters. When a disciplinary decision is announced, fans want to understand what happened, what rule was involved, and why a particular consequence was chosen. Without that information, speculation fills the gap. That's exactly what happened with the online "if she goes, I go" narrative. The quote became bigger than the evidence behind it. Across #CaitlynClark, fans began discussing what Clark's reaction might be in a hypothetical situation. Would she defend her teammate publicly? Would she simply focus on basketball? Would the FIBA organization release a statement? Nobody could honestly know without an actual event and an actual response from Clark. And that's where responsible sports coverage has to draw the line. A compelling headline is one thing. Presenting speculation as confirmed news is another. Meanwhile, the supposed 50% of fans claim continued attracting attention. But again, there is no reliable basis for assigning an exact percentage. Caitlin Clark's influence is enormous. That's undeniable. But the WNBA is made up of many teams, many players, and millions of different fans. The league's audience cannot be reduced to one number without real data. Across #IndianaFever, supporters continued focusing on what they could actually see. The team's chemistry, the competition, the performances, and the developing relationships between players. That's where the real story remains. Because if a genuine controversy ever emerges, fans will have plenty of time to analyze it once the facts are available. Until then, the smartest approach is to separate three things: what is confirmed, what is rumored, and what is purely hypothetical. As the season continues, the Fever still have games to play. The WNBA still has a season to finish. And the players still have careers to build. As the debate finally began to slow down, one thing became clear. The biggest story wasn't actually a confirmed ultimatum from Caitlin Clark. It wasn't a verified announcement that Sophie Cunningham had been suspended. And there was certainly no reliable evidence proving that the WNBA would lose exactly 50% of its fans. The real story was something much more interesting. The enormous power of modern sports fandom. Across #CaitlynClark, fans have demonstrated just how emotionally invested they are in the Indiana Fever and in the players they follow. When a favorite player faces criticism, fans respond. When a teammate faces controversy, fans defend them. And when a dramatic headline appears, millions of people want to know what happens next. That's the environment surrounding the WNBA today. A league that once operated mostly outside the mainstream sports conversation is now attracting enormous national attention. Caitlin Clark has become one of the most recognizable faces of that growth. But she isn't the only reason the league is succeeding. Across #WNBA, stars across the league continue attracting passionate fan bases. Every team has its own identity. Every player has supporters. And every game creates another opportunity for the league to expand. That's why reducing the WNBA's future to one player, or one rumored suspension, would miss the bigger picture. At the same time, there's no denying Clark's influence. Her popularity has introduced countless new viewers to women's basketball. People who started watching because of Clark have discovered other players. They've learned rivalries. They've followed different teams. And many have become genuine WNBA fans. That's perhaps the most important part of the story. A superstar can open the door. But the league has to give fans a reason to stay. Competitive games, Elite athletes. Strong teams. Memorable moments. Those are what build a lasting sports audience. Across #IndianaFever, supporters now have another reason to watch closely. The team continues developing. The players continue building chemistry. And every game creates another chapter. As for the viral "if she goes, IGO" quote, until Caitlin Clark herself confirms those words, they should remain exactly what they are. An unverified claim circulating online. And that's an important distinction. Because the most powerful sports stories don't need invented details. The real competition is already dramatic enough. The real players are already compelling enough. And the real WNBA already has millions of fans watching. So now the question goes to you. Do you think superstar players have more influence over professional leagues than ever before? Would a major suspension involving a popular player create a massive fan reaction? And what do you think the future holds for Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham, and the Indiana Fever? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more #WNBA, #Caitlin Clark, #IndianaFever, player news, controversies, and basketball analysis. Because in today's WNBA, one headline can start a conversation. But the basketball is what keeps it going.